spot way in the back. Already has strategy out of this
So the VP will be here in about 4 minutes. Sorry, he's just running a little behind. I'm on time. You know, in Dutchman, I'm going to be on time all the time. We're just at a farm event by Anthem. He got caught a little bit behind over there. So talk about the farm bill and stuff like that. So, hey, I'm here. I'll take any questions. Anybody have any questions? I can tell you that we're off right now. We start Congress again on Monday. We got a big budget bill we got to get passed. We got a farm bill we got to get passed. We got a National Defense Authorization Act we got to pass. So there are a lot of things going on right now in Congress that have to happen. So for myself, I sit on 2 committees. I sit on Ways and Means. That handles all the taxing issues for you. Again, I want to have you have more money in your pocket, so reducing taxes to me is big. It also handles trade, and then I also sit on the Ag Committee. And on the Ag Committee, we have the big farm bill. Once every 5 years, we got to pass a farm bill. So we're working, those are really my big lifts right now, of working on an economic package to reduce taxes, and then also working on the farm bill. So with that, I got questions. Yeah.
Since it's not your belly whip, but the fact that some of them are
Can't hear you.
Some of them are talking in Congress about restricting budgets for DOJ, FBI, and some of those intelligence agencies because of what they weaponization. Are you hearing that it's a positive?
So the question was, is there going to be money restrictions for the DOJ, FBI, and stuff like that? We see a 2-tiered system, and just fact for myself, right? I've been very involved, sitting on Ways and Means on the Oversight Committee. I've been very involved with the 2 whistleblowers on the IRS. Okay, they are very legitimate, extremely legitimate. They were high up. We announced that a week and a half ago of what we found out. So now we're looking at how we can move forward, having maybe an independent person from the Department of Justice start working on this case. The other way is, like you said, is start taking away appropriation dollars on some of these areas. And that's what we as a caucus are working on right now, of how we want to handle all these issues that are coming down the pipe. And they're real.
And the budget has to be done by
And the budget has to be done by September. So we got, we got to do a lot of this stuff in July. So we got a lot of work ahead of us.
So how independent is the DOJ?
That's the problem. Our problem is when you have the DOJ and when you have the FBI, where else do you go? Right? I mean, so we as Congress have to act. We can show the facts, which we're doing as Ways and Means. We came out with the facts a week and a half ago and said, these are X, Y, and Z, these are what happened. And now, that's the only place we can go with it. Because we can't ourselves prosecute. So we got to find somebody that says independently, all right, we're going to take a look at this. I hear you. Other questions or thoughts?
I have a question.
Yeah, so we passed the bill, and it could be bipartisan. So the question was, are we doing anything to stop China from buying our farmland? So my bill, which addressed this to stop China from buying our farmland, was part of our economic package, or part of our package, and we passed it out of the House. It's sitting in the Senate right now. So I'm working with several senators to try and get this stopped. And we're coming at it a little differently. We believe our farmland creates energy. So for our own energy security, we believe that our farmland should not be sold to China or other foreign adversaries. So we're working very hard to get that done.
When I went to law school in the 80s, I learned that corporations could not buy farmland in Iowa. When did that change?
Well, I'm not sure when that changed, but you do have the ability where corporations can buy land, and that's sort of what's happening.
But they couldn't then.
They couldn't then, but they can now. So I can't answer when that change happened. But again, from the Farm Bill, what we're trying to do is we got to make sure the Iowa farmland stays with the Iowa farmer, to make sure it happens for the next generation. And we can't have outside entities buying our farmland because they don't take care of the land. All right, our farmers do. So we're trying to make sure that we can create some tax initiative for that next generation to pass that land to their son or their daughter who wants to farm that land. So that's what we're working on, again, so it doesn't go into other people's hands. So. Yeah, and we have Susan Stewart here, but I just want to say thank you to Susan. I know she helped put this all together. You're head of the Republican Nation.
I just wanted to make a quick pitch for the Northwest Iowa Republican Women. We have a Facebook page. It is an organization sanctioned by the Republican Party of Iowa. We have candidates. We talk about Republican issues. We meet every month or two. If you are interested, you can either catch me or check our Facebook page, Northwest Iowa Republican Women. We are so thrilled to be able to bring candidates like former Vice President Pence to town and have Randy as the ambassador to all candidates in our area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for all you do. Yes.
I have a question. If you really want to prove that there's a two-tier justice system, check the Woodbury County Courthouse hard drive, because it shows judges are committing ethical violations, and then when they change it, it becomes a felony under Title 18, Section 242 of the Federal Code. So why is they allowed to commit felonies, but the common man can't?
That's a good question. I don't know about the
Then
issue.
are you going to do something about it?
So,
Yes or no?
Woodbury County issue.
You really don't want to change or prove there's a
I'm from the federal
two-tier.
level. I'm not from the
It's a
county.
felony.
So,
You
go ahead.
really don't want it, do you?
I just got told by one of my customers, Babylon got sold out.
Huh?
You're right.
Japanese-owned
I know.
Company.
Because if they really wanted to check it, they would.
Babylon, great big grain terminal. They got 17 ports. Bungie bought it. And Bungie,
Oh, I'm wrong.
which is a region.
I didn't go to war
just merged.
twice.
So
Just
now we're
sit
born
and
owned
take
on the
it.
grain side of the big guys. And I didn't know nothing about this. It was something personally inside.
And that's concerning because Corteva also was bought by China. So,
Yeah.
I mean, China entity. And that's what's, I mean, you look at agriculture right now, farmland, seed, fertilizer, all this stuff. Bungie, I mean, it's really a concern. And that's why I look at it. I was just with Latham Seeds and Seco. I mean, hopefully we can buy homegrown stuff. I mean, we got to start looking at this because we don't need to support our foreign adversaries. Hey, I want to introduce my great friend. All right. I am so excited for him to be here. So I just want to tell you a little bit about Vice President. So he was in Congress for 12 years, then became the governor of Indiana for 4 years, and then Donald Trump tapped him, and then his wife Karen is here also. And then President Trump tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, would you be your vice president?" And he served 4 years, did so many amazing things. So many amazing things. Obviously, I'm a tax guy. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is amazing, cut all our taxes, which is huge, and all the things that we did around the world. And I just want to say thank you so much. And I just am excited to introduce you to all the people in Woodbury County, and I'll let you take it from here.
Wow.
I have a question.
Well, let me, if I could just say a few words, and then I want to hear what's on your mind. I'm really anxious to hear. First and foremost, would you just join me in expressing our appreciation? You, here in Woodbury County, send a man of integrity, of character, of faith, of deep conservative values to Washington, D.C. Join me in thanking Congressman Randy Pence. We are delighted to be here. Karen and I were in the parade in Urbandale yesterday. 2-mile parade. Fortunately, it was only 90 degrees. And the really nice thing about the Urbandale parade is that the last half mile is all uphill. We got a wonderful warm reception, but I got to tell you, we got up early. We've been traveling all over northwest Iowa today. And Congressman Feenstra, I want to thank you for your hospitality. I want to thank you for your great leadership. It's just a joy to be with all of you. And secondly, it's a particular joy for me to be traveling today with a Marine Corps mom, a pilot, an accomplished artist, and frankly, the best second lady the United States of America has ever had, Karen Pence. Well, we're delighted to be with all of you. I'm going to share for just a couple of minutes with my back turned to some very nice people. But let me just say to each and every one of you, you know, our lives have changed a lot since the last time we were together. Karen and I, after we moved out of the White House and out of the Naval Observatory where the Vice President lives, we moved back home to Indiana. I bought 5 acres and a pond. I got a John Deere riding mower, 25 horsepower, 0 turn radius. And I get out there on the lawnmower periodically. The best part about our life is that our family, which is what the Pences are really all about, our kids, my son Michael's a captain in the United States Marine Corps, and he and his wife Sarah gave us our first 2 granddaughters over the last 2 years. You can applaud that if you want. And my daughter Charlotte, who's a best-selling author and writes for the Daily Wire, some of the young people are familiar with that great outfit, is married to one of my unworthy son-in-laws. Henry's actually a lieutenant in the United States Navy and also, like our son, a fighter pilot. We're incredibly proud of them. Our daughter's a Yale Law graduate, married to a wonderful guy who works in the space industry, was actually the first civilian employee at the United States Space Force. But our daughter Charlotte also gave us our 3rd granddaughter. So our lives have been rich and full the last 2 years since moving back home again to Indiana. The reason I stand before you today, the reason 3 weeks ago I came to Iowa to announce my intention to seek the Republican nomination for president is because I think this country's in a lot of trouble. When we look at the experiences we've had, not just to be your vice president, where I had the privilege to represent America overseas, to advance our administration's agenda on Capitol Hill and all across the country, but my 4 years as governor of Indiana, where we balanced budgets and cut taxes and expanded the largest education school choice program in the country. But it was also my years in Congress. I served for 12 years in the House of Representatives, where Congressman Feaster serves now with such great distinction. And actually I was a leader among House conservatives in the Congress during those years. And as my wife Karen and I reflect on our calling at this time in our life, we look at those years where we learned our way around the Congress, we learned our way around state government, we learned our way around the White House, and we just felt compelled to step forward and offer our services to this country. Because I truly do believe Joe Biden has weakened America at home and abroad. The truth of the matter is that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan was a disgrace. It's emboldened the enemies of freedom. Now we have Russia on the march in Eastern Europe, where it was just a few short days ago. China continues to menace in the Asia-Pacific. Now more than ever, we need renewed American strength. And we need to be giving our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard not the budget cuts of the Biden administration, but the support they need to have the military fit to the fight. Here at home, one crisis after another is a man-made crisis, whether it be the crisis at our southern border, the crisis of inflation at a 40-year high, whether it be the crisis of rising energy costs putting a tremendous burden, or the steady assault on our liberties and values in this country. I tell everyone, every crisis the American people are facing today is man-made. That man's name is Joe Biden. So we have to decide right here and right now that Joe Biden will never be reelected as president. But I will honestly tell you as I close, and then Congressman, I'd love to have a chance to take some questions and hear what's on your all's mind. Frankly, as rich as our lives have been since we were last together, it would have been fairly easy for me to sit this one out. 20 years in public service in the Congress and as governor and as your vice president, it's an incredible experience. But I have to tell you, that's just not the way I was raised. My father, who would have been 94 today had he not left us 30 years ago, combat veteran in the Korean War, best man I'll ever know. My dad often repeated one phrase in particular, and that was, to whom much is given, much will be required. And my wife Karen and I feel like we've been given much opportunities to serve and to help lead this country. And with all the struggles the American people are facing, with all the challenges America is facing at home and abroad, we felt called to step forward and offer our services. And so I'm running for President of the United States because I think we can turn this country around. But it's going to take new leadership in the Republican Party and new leadership in the White House. And I promise the people of Iowa I'm going to work my heart out to earn your support in the days ahead. So thank you very much, and God bless you.
How do you stand on Fed Now and CBDC? Central Bank Digital.
And on fentanyl, you said?
No.
On what?
Fed Now.
The Fed.
Fed Now.
Well, look, I honestly think I authored legislation 10 years ago that would end what's called the dual mandate at the Fed. It was a few decades back that we asked the Federal Reserve to not just worry about protecting our currency, which is now suffering the worst inflation in 40 years, but they also added full employment to the stated objectives of the Federal Reserve. I'd like to see us end that. What we ought to be doing is we ought to be looking to the President, we ought to be looking to Congress to promote policies that'll make sure Americans are working. What we need is a Federal Reserve that will focus on protecting the integrity of the dollar and the integrity of our currency. And I also believe that with regard to cryptocurrency or digital currency, we also have to be very, very careful proceeding forward. We really do. So, but we've got to protect the integrity of the dollar. And probably the most important way we do that is by confronting the debt crisis that this country is facing. We have a national debt today the size of our nation's economy for the first time since World War II. And I think I might be the only person running for president on the Republican side that says we've got to be honest with the American people about that debt crisis. And we've got to say the time has come for us to deal with the principal drivers of that. Look, if you got hair the same color as me, and I see a few people in the room that do, you don't need to be concerned about this at all. If you're in retirement now, we're not going to change anything about Social Security. If you're going to retire in the next 25 years, same goes. We're not going to touch Social Security. But for Americans under the age of 40, I think we can advance the kind of common sense reforms that take these New Deal programs and give younger Americans actually a better deal, that preserve these programs while putting our nation back on a path of fiscal solvency and reform. Left unchecked, the national debt that we have today will increase by 5 times in the next 25 years. I'm not willing to do that to my 3 granddaughters, okay? But it's going to take leadership, being honest with the American people, and offering common sense and compassionate solutions. I promise you, if I'm your president, we'll get it done. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, the young lady up there said something about a 2-tier justice system,
Yep.
and I'm glad that your wife and you are a father and mother of a Marine, because I was an 8404 combat foreman for the Marine Corps for 21 years, 9 months, and 3 days.
You weren't?
I was. Would
Give
you like
her
to
a
see
round of
my
applause,
ID?
will you?
I don't need a round. I want to know what you're going to do about the 2-tier justice system, because we have corruption in Sioux City, Iowa. Judges are committing ethical violations, and then when they change the court records, it becomes a felony under Title 18, Section 242 of the Federal Code. What are you going to do about it?
Well, let me say first and foremost, I couldn't agree with you more.
Then do something about it, because I'm a
Hold
voter.
on, hold on. I'm not
I
going
will
to argue
take
with a
more.
Marine. Hang on a second. I agree with you whole cloth. The American people have lost confidence in the Justice Department, and on day one, if I'm President of the United States, we're going to clean house of all the senior leadership at the Justice Department. We're going to put men and women in all the positions of authority, whether it's Attorney General, whether it's Director of the FBI, who are respected by people on both sides of the aisle for their integrity and their commitment to the rule of law.
You
We're
can
going to
prove it.
re-establish confidence in equal treatment before the law. So help me God, I promise you.
By checking the hard drives of the Iowa courts online.
Well, I'm
Look under my name, Van Halen, and you'll find it.
Yeah.
You'll find the case.
Yeah, in terms of those local cases, look, we got problems around the country. of
But
local
that proves the
prosecutors.
corruption in the
We got
DOJ.
problems of local prosecutors in major cities. They're not prosecuting serious crimes. I mean, look, we really got to establish and renew our nation's commitment to being, as they said at the time of the American founding, we're a government of laws and not of men and women, right? I mean, we've got to reaffirm our commitment to the Constitution of the United States. We've got to reaffirm our commitment to the rule of law. And if you know anything about me, you know how serious I am about that.
If you know anything about me, I'm serious too.
Thank you. God bless you.
Because I will
like
make sure one way or another it gets changed.
her. I like her. I like your dog too.
Thank you.
Yes,
Excuse me, I am in
There's
the
no pipeline. I got relatives working there, 11,000 people that leave off the
Excuse me, I do apologize.
Yeah.
I got friends in Canada, they can fire a whole damn country with oil on there, number one street through. And also the border, southern border down there. I've got an in-law, aunt, that's a politician from Brazil. And she says, Brazil's loving it. They cleaned out the prisons of all the rapists, the murders, and the thieves. They love it. She's like, you're gonna call to keep a criminal in jail? We're down the border right now. How are we gonna cure that too? That's the big one. You gotta
Well,
do it.
first, look, day one, as your new president, I promise you, we're going to end the war on energy. And we're going to put America back on a path of energy. I mean, for years when I was in Congress, we often talked about achieving energy independence. And I thought it would take years to get there. I was determined to get there. I was always about those policies, Congressman Feenstra. But during the Trump-Pence administration, we actually became a net exporter of energy for the first time in 75 years. And so, you know, day one is you approve the Keystone and Dakota pipelines, you expedite leasing of domestic lands, you open up the Alaska National Wildlife Region that's been closed down. And for heaven's sakes, we don't need a president of the United States going hat in hand to Saudi Arabia asking them to pump more oil and then being told no. We got incredible resources in this country, and we need to be developing them. We can do it in a responsible way. I promise you we'll do it. On the southern border, look, I've been down to the border a half a dozen times. We got family that lives in Arizona. But I've been down there, met with Border Patrol agents. I'm telling you what, everything that's happening at the southern border of the United States is the fault of President Joe Biden and the Democrats. I mean, on day one, he shut down construction of the wall. You can go down there, Congressman Feenstra has been there, he'll tell you. It looks like a parked freight train. They got these steel girders rusting in the sun because Joe Biden on day one said, stop construction on the wall. So you have these huge gaps in the wall. You know, we built hundreds of miles of wall. And now the cartels just, essentially, I've had Border Patrol agents tell me the cartels have operational control of our border. 5 million people have come across the border. It's the worst tide of human trafficking in world history. And it's all being driven by the policies. I negotiated the Remain in Mexico agreement on behalf of the administration. Had the Mexicans sit across the table. We got them to agree to make people wait in Mexico while they apply for asylum. We executed Title 42 in the early days of COVID. Illegal immigration and asylum abuse dropped 90%. And we can do it again. We can secure the southern border of the United States of America by finishing the wall, putting all the policies back into effect that we had under our administration. And we'll do it. I promise you. It's not rocket science. Yes, ma'am. I'll tell you what, I'm going to shake every hand in the place. I want to meet everybody in here, and I guarantee you everybody in here wants to meet Karen. Yes, sir, young man, go ahead.
Sir, it seems like every single day American intelligence is falling behind. The National Guardsman, Jack Teixeira, recently leaking the documents, and also with China flying the spy balloon right over the United States collecting intelligence on us. What would you do as president to make sure that American intelligence remains at the top?
First, let's just talk about China first. I want you to use that phone. If you lose interest in my remarks later, you can Google it. I gave the first major speech on China in our administration in 2018. I worked on it with the president. I mean, it was our administration statement. But we basically drew a line in the sand and said, we're taking a different approach to China. After years of trade abuses, billions of dollars in intellectual property theft, military provocations in the Asia Pacific, unspeakable human rights abuses in China itself. We just said the old days are over. I mean, America about 25 years ago kind of basically made a bet. It was that if we increase economic exchange and trade with China, that China would essentially move in the direction of freedom. The truth is the opposite has happened. The more wealthy China has become, largely at the expense of the United States, the more closed their society has become and the more authoritarian their society has become, repressing religious freedom, repressing human rights, and becoming more aggressive in the wider world. So I think the way you deal with China is the greatest economic and strategic threat the United States faces in the 21st century. It can only be met with American strength. And what we got to do is we got to push back on the Biden administration's continuous attempts to cut military spending. We quite frankly, this debt ceiling deal that they just did, which look, you got to pay the nation's bills. I'm not being critical. But if they don't get the 13 appropriations bills passed, you're going to end up with a 1% cut in military spending after inflation at a time when China's dropping a new battleship in the Pacific about every month. Okay? I mean, what we need is a military fitted to the times. And it's going to take vision, it's going to take leadership, it's going to take a brand of leadership that can actually bring Republicans and Democrats together to say, here are the challenges we're facing in the world, and we need an armed forces of the United States for the 21st century challenges. Secondly, I think the time has come for us to use access to the economy of the United States of America to demand that China open their markets to what we make and what we grow. If they don't open their markets, we ought to continue to raise tariffs on China's access to the United States of America. We began that with $250 billion in tariffs. It actually brought them to the table. We had a phase one trade deal that had some good outcomes for agriculture. Do you remember that, Congressman? We got a long way to go for China to open up. It all begins with security. We've got to stand strong. Peace comes through strength, and I promise you, if I have the privilege of being President of the United States, we're going to meet this moment with a strong armed force of the United States, a strong commitment to the Asia Pacific and to our interests there, and we're going to strengthen the American economy by demanding that China level the playing field and open their markets to what we grow and what we make. So help me God, I promise you. Time to get tough. Ma'am.
Thank you for your service for all the years that you've had. And you were commenting on the fact that all of these problems belong to Joe Biden, and they do. However, if it wasn't for your vote, we would not have Joe Biden in the White House.
Right.
Joe Biden shouldn't be there. And all those wonderful things that you and Trump were doing together would be continuing, and this country would be on the right path. Do you ever second guess yourself? That was a constitutional right that you had to send those votes back to the states. It was not like you were going to personally elect him. We all know by the number of votes that were there who won that election.
Well,
You changed history for this country.
Yeah, let me speak to the issue, because I think it's an issue that continues to be misunderstood. I know by God's grace I did exactly what the Constitution of the United States required of me that day. And I kept my oath. And let me be very respectful of the question and tell you, look, states conduct our elections. You never want to let Washington, D.C. run elections. And you certainly would never want one person in Washington, D.C. to decide who the President of the United States is.
You weren't deciding, you were just sending it back to the states.
Ma'am, let me explain it to you. States conduct elections. Iowa, where I live in Indiana. And after there were questions in a half a dozen or so states, we had reviews of the results, 60 different lawsuits that went to the courts where there are questions. There's two ways that they're reviewed. Number one is you take those issues to the legal process in the state for recount. Okay? Secondly, you take them to the courts, which we did very aggressively. Now, there were voting irregularities that took place. You had a half a dozen states that changed the rules in the name of COVID, but the courts upheld those changes in virtually every instance, and in every instance where they would have had any impact whatsoever. At the end of the day, when Iowa certified your results and sent them to Washington, D.C., when Indiana certified our results, the Constitution of the United States, in Article 2, says the job of the Vice President is to serve as the presiding officer of a joint session where you open and count the votes. Don't take my word for it, go read the Constitution. Not really, I say this with great affection and respect. The Constitution is very clear. My job was to oversee a session of Congress where objections could be heard. And I made sure that objections would be recognized. So we would hear whatever evidence or whether debate there was. But the Constitution says you open and count the votes, no more, no less. The Constitution affords no authority for the Vice President or anyone else to reject votes or return votes to the states. Never been done before, should never be done in the future. I'm sorry, ma'am, but that's actually what the Constitution says. No Vice President in American history ever asserted the authority that you have been convinced that I have. But I want to tell you, with all due respect, I said before, I said when I announced, President Trump was wrong about my authority that day, and he's still wrong. I believe it with all my heart. Now, that being said, I am encouraged by the fact that states around the country have been passing changes in election laws at the state level that are protecting the integrity of the vote. I frankly think we ought to have voter ID in every state in this country. I really do. But at the end of the day, I will also say to you that while I believe by God's grace that I did my duty that day, I do. No second guessing. I really think that this election has got to be about the future. If we spend the next election talking about the past, you're going to get 4 more years of Democrats in the White House. Our candidates that spent the 22 midterm elections talking about relitigating the last election lost, and they lost in places that we should have won. So I promise you, I'm going to stand on what I did. I'm going to stand on the Constitution, and any job I ever have in the future, I promise you, I'll keep my oath even when it hurts, like it says in Psalm 15. That's the job that you have. You raise your right hand and you promise to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I believe we did that. But all this debate notwithstanding, I say to my friends in the room, and we're friends all, we're all on the same team as near as I can tell. Folks, we got to be focused on the future. Elections are about the future. And I promise you, in our campaign, our family is going to be focused on the challenges facing the American people and winning a boundless American future on our highest ideals. I promise you. Please.
Along that same line, to keep things going for the future,
Yes.
would you consider pardoning President Trump like Ford pardoned Nixon so the country can move forward?
Well, let me say, I've been a governor. I've actually pardoned people. And I think any pardon that you would conduct would only be appropriate to consider after somebody's been found guilty. And I don't know why some of my competitors in the Republican primary assume the president's going to be found guilty.
Well, but Nixon wasn't found guilty of anything, and that's
Well,
why I felt this was wrong.
Well, that's a very good rebuttal. I'm very impressed with that. I actually am. It's very good. Nixon admitted guilt. All right, he stipulated guilt. He resigned. Okay, but well done. Give me a high five. So that's my attitude about that. I think there's a careful process, and I promise, if I'm president of the United States, we'll always take the approach that I took when I was governor, and that is carefully consider what the weight of justice is in the best interest of all the people concerned. Okay? I promise. I promise. Let me see back here, the gentleman with the right color hair. Sir.
Mr. Pence,
Call me Mike.
I appreciate one thing about you, and that is your willingness to express your faith. Okay? I want to tell you this. 60 years ago, that same Jesus that you talked about told me that before I die, I'm going to see the destruction of this nation. Okay? Now, back in 2016, I really believe that the Lord chose Donald Trump because he was one out of the number of representative Republicans that could do the job that needs to be done to clarify and give this country back. Okay? My question to you is, do you anticipate the kind of response from the news media, from the people that they gave to Donald Trump? Are you prepared to deal with them, and can you handle them? That's, you know.
Well, first off, thank you for the affirmation about our shared faith. I like to tell people I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. The most important decision I ever made was in 1978, sitting on a hillside at a Christian music festival, a place called Asbury University in Kentucky, a place that was much in the news recently. And it was that night that it's like I heard the words for the first time that God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, that whoever might believe in him might not perish but have everlasting life. And I stood up on a rainy night. I walked down that hillside. I found a young counselor and I prayed to receive Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior.
Amen.
Changed my life forever. And I truly, it's been on that foundation of faith and an imperfect walk as a believer that I've lived my whole life, and it's been his grace that has sustained me throughout. Now, with regard to criticism from the media, I will tell you I have some familiarity with that. A little bit. In fact, my wife, I'll tell you, my wife, I don't know if I mentioned my incredible wife Karen is here. So my wife, when she was second lady of the United States, was teaching at a little Christian school that our kids attended when we were in Congress. She had taught there as an art teacher in those years, but when she was second lady, they were needing an art teacher, and they called her up and said, Mrs. Pence, we know you're kind of busy being second lady of the United States, but would you come over for a day and a half and be art teacher at Emmanuel Christian School? She agreed to do it, and believe it or not, many in the liberal media got downwind of it. Some liberal groups found out that this was a Christian school that actually required teachers to sign on to a statement of faith, including believing in traditional marriage. And they started to attack her, and I got to tell you, that got my Irish up. But I got to tell you, she stood strong, the school stood strong, and we won a victory for religious liberty. Just like this last week, when the Supreme Court of the United States gave you not one, but two strong decisions defending the religious freedom of every American. Yeah, we have some familiarity with that. I've taken my share of blows in the national level. It's just part of the process, part of what you got to be able to do. I always say I'm a conservative, but I'm not in a bad mood about it. You know, I think you put your head down, you smile, you just keep going and keep delivering victories. Because I'll always believe, like the old book says, many more are with us than are with them. All right?
Maybe you can clarify something for me. Do you think that the remarks or the attack against Donald Trump, is it because of who he is, or is it because of what he was trying to do? And if the next president wants to do what he was trying to do, I think they're going to receive just as much BS as Donald Trump did.
Well, thanks for cleaning that up. Look, you got to understand, so I wrote a book recently. I'd love if you read it. It's entitled So Help Me God. If I brought a copy, I'd give it to you. I will tell you that, as I wrote in the book, it was our inauguration day, January 20th, 2017, at the front page of the Washington Post, had a headline that said, "The quest to impeach Donald Trump begins today." I mean, there was not only not a honeymoon at the beginning of our administration, they were going after with this absurd Russia hoax stuff from even before we were inaugurated. And then 2.5 years later, and now the Durham report comes out and reconfirmed that investigation by the FBI should never even been commenced, because this was based on an opposition research, politics. So yeah, look, the president can defend himself, and you know, he usually can give as good as he gets. But I got to tell you, those early battles in the administration were totally motivated by an effort to upend. I think many on the Democratic left and many of their allies in the media were so offended that we defeated Hillary Clinton, which none of them predicted. I predicted it. I knew we were going to win. Oh, well, I did. You can go look it up. Go look on YouTube. I was on Meet the Press about a week before the election. Old Chuck Todd, you know. Chuck Todd looked at me and he said, he looked at me, and this was a week that Hillary Clinton was announcing cabinet appointments, okay? And the polls, there were all different types of polls. There were polls that had us losing by a lot, and polls that had us losing by a little. It's true. So he looks at me and he kind of sympathetically, Chuck Todd on Meet the Press says, so what do you think is going to happen? You know, like he was asking, how bad is it going to be? And I just looked at him, you can check it out. I looked at him, I said, I think we're going to win. And he went, why do you think that? And I said, Chuck, I don't know anything about the polls, but I said, I've been out among the American people. You know, if they wanted a big crowd, they sent Trump. If they wanted a little crowd, they'd send me. But I mean, it was all the same people, right? And I saw a determination on the faces of the American people like I'd never seen before. I knew we were going to win in 2016. I knew we'd have more support come 2020, and we did. 10 million more votes. And I believe with all my heart the resolve and resilience and determination that I've witnessed traveling across this country the last 2 years is greater still. And we're going to win back the White House. We're going to send this guy back to Congress. We're going to win the Senate. We're going to turn this country around. I promise.
My big concern is that we've got some really good Republican candidates. And is it going to fragment the situation so much that they don't, you know, there isn't any majority?
Yeah.
And I'm concerned about that because we've got great, you know, especially you and, you know, Tim Scott, and you know, and there's several. But when it comes down to the vote, and it's going to be fragmented, that's going to hurt all of you. How do you think we're going to address that?
Just vote for Mike Pence. That'll settle that out. No, all kidding aside, look, I have great confidence in the people of Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. Republican primary voters beginning here. That's why I announced my campaign in Iowa. The road to the White House starts in Iowa, and Republicans are going to prove that again. I have great confidence that Republican primary voters are going to choose the right leadership fitted to this time. I really do, believe with all my heart. And in terms of once we arrive on a standard bearer, people have said to me, well, you know, there's differences in the party. We have different opinions on issues. I accept that. But I think I got two secret weapons for party unity. Joe and Kamala. Let me promise you, Joe and Kamala are going to unite the Republican Party. We're going to have independents. We're going to have conservative Democrats. And we're going to run them out of the White House. And we're going to win this thing. Yes, sir. Go.
I've watched you for years, and I do believe without a question you're a Christian, solid, good man. My concern is this way. You've got Trump and you've got DeSantis. In my eyes, those guys are street fighters. And I mean, the world we have today, this crazy, crazy world, the obscene, nasty, the woke stuff. We need a street fighter in there. We need somebody that's just going to go in there and, like you said, clean house. We have several FBI agents who should be in jail today, but they're being ignored. We need somebody to go in there and actually accomplish things, not just talk about it. Make it happen. We need a street fighter. I'm all for you. I gotta know that you're gonna be all in and you're gonna be in there kicking some butt.
Nice.
Well, let me say, you just said two things in there. Let me tell you, I spent a lot of years in Washington, which I apologize for. But it didn't take, all right? I'm still the same cheerful conservative Hoosier I was the day I left. But you know the way you fight in Washington, D.C.? You stand. You know how you fight in Washington, D.C.? You stand your ground. You say, I'm here and I'm not moving. When I was battling against the big spenders in my own party and a Republican president, when I was a member of Congress, we just planted our feet. I was one of 33 members of Congress that opposed No Child Left Behind because essentially George Bush was doubling the size of the Federal Department of Education. And I believe education is a state and local function. And if I'm president, we're going to shut down the Federal Department of Education and send those resources back to the state. You know, a lot of, I think sometimes we tend to think that friction and fireworks is how you fight in Washington. The way you get things done, and I say this with great respect, so I appreciate you keeping an open mind. The way I've learned you get things done in Washington, D.C. is you let your yes be yes and your no be no. And I got to tell you, I was the conference chairman of the Republicans the first time we retired Nancy Pelosi. And I traveled all across the country to 35 states to make sure we retired Nancy Pelosi once and for all, right? She's done, but I'll tell you something. Nancy Pelosi's been the driving force in the Democratic Party for a long time. And the reason is because she plants her feet, she doesn't move, okay? And I promise you, if I'm president of the United States, I'm going to take this agenda, I'm going to take these conservative positions, and we're going to present them in a way that gives people a chance to come our way so we can get things done. But I'm going to stand firm. And anybody that knows me knows that I'm willing to do that. You got to stand your ground in this business. Okay, you can't be moving around on issues, particularly things that bear upon the security, prosperity, and liberties of the American people. And on that count, I promise you, you'll have a fighter at Mike Pence. I promise you.
I love what you've been saying, but as far as the FBI, the DOJ, the intelligence service, and all that, what about the first 5 or whatever. But there's a deeper issue, and that's this civil service, where people, bureaucracy is so large, and there are ways, pretty good, that you can get in there and get rid of that civil service, so that you don't have people fighting you, whoever the president is, fight you the entire way. The slow walking, you know what tricks that they do. We need to get rid of that civil service protection for all those people that have been in there. They're Democrats.
Tell me your first name. Linda. Linda, this is such an important issue. It's not an above-the-fold headline issue. But let me tell you something. If I'm president of the United States, we're going to take on the deep state by passing the first major civil service reform since Teddy Roosevelt was president of the United States. And when Teddy Roosevelt came in, Washington was filled with people appointed, idiot nephews and people that were incompetent in their role. So they created a civil service statute and reform. But the net effect of that 100 years on has been creating almost a permanent bureaucracy in Washington. And I must tell you that I'm going to sit down with Congressman Feenstra. I'm going to sit down with members of the Senate if I'm president of the United States, and we're going to move common sense reforms that allow a new administration to come in and frankly allow other officials to come in at the cabinet level to bring in new blood, to bring in fresh ideas, to have the kind of turnover that will make sure that we have a government as good as our people that's responsive to the American people. So it's something I've talked about before. I'm not just saying it to you because you brought it up, but civil service reform has to be top of mind for a new incoming administration. I promise you will be for us. But go back, Google that later or something. Teddy Roosevelt was the last one to do it in any significant way. But we'll do it again in 2025. Yes, sir.
Well, you're here running for president. Why should we vote for you rather than President Trump?
Well, I'm not running against anybody. I'm running for president.
Why should we vote for you and not President
I
Trump?
would submit to you that the world is becoming a more dangerous place almost by the day. We have major problems that are facing American families, businesses, particularly small business in America, particularly family farming. We have an steady assault on our liberty. We need to get, I love your phrase, get things done. Okay? I mean, Washington has been kind of a running argument for too long. We fought our way through that when we were in the White House and we had a Republican House and a Republican Senate. We passed historic tax relief, we passed regulatory reform, we passed historic investments in our national defense. But for me, what I think calls my wife and I to this moment is I think that my experience as your vice president, as a governor that understands the vital and important role that states and federalism plays in our national life, and as someone who served in the Congress and knows how you get things done in Congress, I honestly think the weight of our experience, I'm uniquely qualified to meet this moment, to get this country turned around, to restore our security, restore our prosperity. And you give me a chance to be your president, I promise you will prove that to be true. Yes, ma'am.
I don't want to make anyone mad, but I think we need an honest president right now here in New York.
Thank you. You're very kind. You're very kind. You're very kind. How about I don't want to turn my back on everybody here. Anybody got anything back here? These guys didn't know. Yes, sir.
I just want to say I will vote for you and Trump because of your integrity, because you don't purposely irritate the enemy, you might say, the opposition. It's kind of like complaining about a mean dog in the house, and you kick him every time you walk through the house. And I just believe that speaking the truth with love and standing your ground, as you mentioned, is the answer. Without creating enemies. I don't think it does anything for our country to go out of your way to demean people, put people down, or be so proud that you can never admit mistakes. And so I appreciate that. I see humility and strength. That's a rare quality.
Well, thank you. I'm very humbled by that. I really am. No pun intended. I really am. But I will tell you, it was Winston Churchill that said, "You'll never get where you're going if you throw a rock at every barking dog." Right? I mean, the truth is, there's a lot of distractions in Washington, D.C. that take your eye off the prize of actually working issues that are affecting the American people. And I'm running for president because the American people are hurting. All right? And the enemies of freedom have been emboldened in the world. And this is a moment that cries out for American leadership. But I want to respond to one thing that you said because it's a deep conviction. I mean, long before our administration arrived in Washington, D.C., our political discourse in this country had become filled with invective on both sides of the aisle. Okay? A lot of people like to point at my former running mate, talk about his approach. But frankly, it's been happening in Washington, D.C. over the last 15 years. I've watched it. I've watched the erosion of the debate. And I think the American people want two things in this next election. I think they want to return to the policies that made our nation stronger, more prosperous than ever before that pandemic hit. But I think the American people want to see us restore a threshold of civility in the public debate, where we can debate these issues in the same way the American people talk to one another every day. You know, I tell people, maybe it's because I moved out of Washington, D.C., but, you know, I mean, our politics are more divided than ever before, but I'm not convinced the American people are as divided as our politics. You get 15 miles out of Washington, D.C., the people of this country actually get along pretty well most days, right? Yeah, in your family alone, right? And I just think, what I like to say is we got to have government as good as our people, that treats one another the way the American people treat each other just about every day. That's how you create the conditions where you get things done. Okay? There are things that you're always going to be on the other side of the divide from someone in the other party. There's a whole range of issues that if you preserve a level of civility in public life, you can find ways to work together and solve real problems. And I'm going to tell you, men and women, the widening threats that we face around the world, that national debt that threatens to literally crush the vitality out of our economy for our children and grandchildren. These are the scope of issues that really are going to require us to have leadership that has at least a chance of bringing people together. And I promise you that's the kind of leadership I'll bring. I really will. Yes, sir, right here.
You got a couple granddaughters. I got better, and I got 3 great granddaughters.
Oh, good for you.
Where do you stand on this transgender sports and stuff and going into the wrestling?
Say again?
Girls. Where do you stand on transgender and sports and on them going into women's wrestling exchange and so forth?
Look, it was amazing to me when President Biden, during his State of the Union address, literally promised to defend, in his words, the God-given right of men to compete in women's sports. And let me tell you what, participation in women's sports should be limited to the gender assigned at birth. This is common sense, it's fairness. We've made incredible progress for women. In the last 25 years, we've opened doors of opportunity in education and professionally, let alone athletics, and the idea that we would allow the erosion of the incredible progress we've made in women's athletics is crazy. The second piece of this, though, I got to tell you, Indiana just did this, and I know Iowa's taken strong steps. We have got to ban chemical or surgical transgender treatment for anyone under the age of 18. I mean, we raised, 3 kids. We survived those teenage years. Kids, look, it's a fact. Any parent or grandparent knows. There's a reason why you can't get a tattoo in Indiana under the age of 18. There's a reason we don't let you drive a car until after you're 16. I mean, it's because young people don't fully appreciate the consequences of their actions. And we've really, the radical left, this transgender ideology that's taken hold in our schools. I was proud that our organization in Washington, the foundation I created, weighed in on that Linn-Mar Community Schools issue, and we're going to fight and we're going to win that. It's amazing to me you got a school in Iowa where you'd have to have a permission slip from your parents to get a Tylenol, but you could get a gender transition plan from the health department without ever telling your folks. That's not bad policy, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you what, we're winning this fight all over the country. Just ask Bud Light. Okay, so that's where I stand. We'll continue to stand on. It's about protecting the kids. We'll protect women's sports, and I'll never have any other view.
How do you fix it?
One more question, good, Randy? Then we can mingle.
I'm curious your standing on workforce crisis. I know it's a big deal here in Iowa with shortage of workers or skilled workers. Any standpoint on that and getting maybe a younger generation involved in trades, but also balance that with college? You know, it seems like we had a lot of generation go to the college stage and then the trades got left behind. How do we balance that out going forward?
I think it's such a profound question. When I was running for governor of Indiana 10 years ago, I was traveling around the state. Now in Indiana, it's a lot like Iowa. I always said, we do 2 things well. We make things and we grow things, right? Just like Iowa. And I was traveling around to high schools, and I made an incredible discovery. It was that all the industrial arts programs that existed back when I was going through high school had largely left high school. They'd gone to community colleges, and the one in Indiana is a statewide community college system. Or sometimes they just simply migrated into trade programs the unions operated. But I'm somebody that was raised to believe that all honest work is honorable, right? And so we set ourselves in Indiana, and as President, I promise you, I'd set myself on the course of encouraging every state in the country, let's make career and vocational education a priority in every high school in America again. We ought to open those doors of opportunity for young people. I mean, find out, look, I am not good with my hands. My wife was teaching a shop class in elementary school when I met her. That's actually a true story. That's why, you know, one time I remember when I was a poor, impoverished graduate student when we were dating, and I had this Chevy Impala that had a rust spot on the trunk, and it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger to where it was about this big around on the back trunk of the car. And so one time when she said, "I'm going to borrow your car," I said, "Good, that's fine." I just met up with her after school that day. And by the time I caught up with her, she surprised me. She walked me out to the car and she had power sanded, primed, and repainted the trunk. So I made dinner, did the dishes. And a little intimidating, to be quite honest with you. Look, I'm not good at that stuff, all right? But there are people that are, and I think high school ought to be a place where you discover your God-given abilities.
Yeah.
And not have to wait to go to community college to figure out that, you know, you love working on electronics or you love working in the trades. To me, it's a critical space. The other part about workforce is, look, and I'll leave it here because you all have been incredibly generous with your time, and I do want to meet as many of you as your time permits. My grandfather got off a boat onto Ellis Island in 1923 from Ireland. That's how Richard Michael Cawley is how Michael Richard Pence got to be born in America and be the 48th Vice President of the United States. I mean, but when my grandfather came, he had to be certified in a particular employment area. It was a tailor in his case, a suit maker, to be able to qualify to come into the country from Ireland in that year, right? Because they had a certain quota. We actually had a more coherent immigration system in certain respects 100 years ago than we have right now. And I believe that right after we secure the border, right, and do the internal enforcement, stop all the asylum abuse that's going on, I think we got to fix this broken immigration system once and for all. We got to design an immigration system that looks at the workforce needs in America and says, here's what we need, here's where we need it, and we got to work out a merit-based immigration system. Now, it's going to take some doing to do that. It would frankly take somebody that knows Congress, that can talk to governors and have them get on board with what they need, and also is in the Oval Office to be able to sign the bill when it gets there. But I mean to tell you, without amnesty, without anything else, I'm talking about we can fix a broken immigration system from here forward. We can meet the workforce needs of this country. And I truly do believe that that's part of the key to a boundless economic future for our children and our grandchildren. But let me close simply by saying thank you again. I'd ask two things to each of you. Number one, I'd ask you to do as careful a job as you always do here in Iowa. I mean, the people of Iowa have always played a role for decades now in shaping our nation's leadership. And I don't know what the Democratic Party is even thinking right now, but I'm heartened to know that the journey to the White House is going to begin here in Iowa. And I encourage you to think very deeply about what are the needs of our nation at home and abroad in this moment. And make your decision when that caucus comes around. And make your decision on that basis. And lastly, I'd ask you if you're of a mind to bow the head and bend the knee from time to time. Karen and I'd be grateful if you'd remember us in your prayer. We're going to be working our hearts out just almost as hard as Randy Feenstra works every day to go earn your support. And I encourage you to also pray for all those good men and women that are standing in the Republican primary. And at the end of the day, pray for the American people. I really believe in my heart of hearts in that ancient verse that says, if his people who are called by his name will humble themselves and pray and turn, he'll hear from heaven, he'll heal this land. The destiny of our nation is going to be tied up in all of us doing all that we need to do to defend everything that's always made this country strong and great and true. And I believe it'll also be tied up in whether we're going to appeal to him who has ever guided this great, great miracle of democracy, because with your work and with his grace, I know the best days for America are yet to come. So thank you very much. God bless you.
Woodbury County, thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
It's just our